Welcome to Silberman Law Firm's Weekly Docket, episode 38, where we talk legal news and practical law. Today is October 3rd, 2024, and I'm Phil Silberman, owner of the firm and your host. And I'm joined by Austin Black, who works at our Dallas office, and my co-host. How are you doing today, Mr. Black?
I am doing great. The weather's getting cooler. We're in the spooky month, and very happy we're finally in fall. And Trader Joe's, they have their fall items finally. I love Trader Joe's fall items. They're great. So good. Yeah.
I'm a big pizza dough person.
Oh, yeah. Their pizza dough is great. Yeah.
I make homemade pizzas for my kids. In fact, I'm going to do.
Do you have one of those like nice pizza ovens? Yeah.
Yeah, I have a.
Oh, wait. That was the Christmas party, right? You got that at the Christmas party?
No, we gave that away at the Christmas party, and I don't know who got it, but no, mine, I actually have in the oven. It's great. What's on our docket today, Mr. Black?
So today, unfortunately, our first legal news section is a loss, an L for Texas. Very sadly, Texas sues, and the Texas Attorney General sues the Biden administration quite frequently, right, on behalf of Texas. And recently, Texas tried to sue the Biden admin over an administrative rule that allowed more immigrants to qualify for green cards and public benefit. A federal judge just tossed out that lawsuit. Maybe that gets appealed, probably. We'll see. But we'll go through the analysis there and why we think it got there and whether or not we think there might be a chance of success on appeal. And then our next legal news topic is much more important. It's a lot of bologna, about 700 pounds of it specifically. U.S. Customs seized over 700 pounds of bologna from a woman at the Texas border, okay? This is not a packaged meal. This is just straight bologna altogether. And we will talk about that, talk about how you might avoid getting pegged for 700 pounds of bologna in the backseat of your car, what you shouldn't bring into the U.S. if you're trying to cross the border from Mexico or Canada, okay? And then our legal questions section. We talked, I think, a few podcasts ago about the institution of new Texas business courts. We mentioned that there was a law passed recently that instituted new Texas business courts, and we'll be going over exactly how you can avail yourselves of those, what they're useful for, what they're not useful for, things like that. And then when you are selling a house, who does not have to complete a seller's disclosure in Texas? And then moving on to Phil's favorite section of the podcast, the rant and rave, we're going to be talking about homecoming season and how Phil is in favor of underage drinking. That might be a bit of a joke, but we are talking about homecoming seasons.
It's not an accurate characterization of my feelings, but we will get to that momentarily. So a lot of good stuff on this show, not including the bologna. Let's go ahead and kick it off with our legal news section. And the first piece we're talking about is Texas was poured out. They can't sue. Turns out they can't sue the Biden administration over a rule that allows more immigrants to qualify for green cards. So the state of Texas Attorney General, on behalf of the state, sued the Biden administration over a rule that made it easier for immigrants not to be deemed a public charge. And if immigrants are not deemed a public charge, then they can qualify for a green card, right? So that pro-immigration Biden rule repealed a Trump-era rule that was really just the opposite, which was a quantifiable rule that said, look, if you're an immigrant and you are on Medicaid or food stamps, then you are automatically deemed a public charge, and therefore you do not qualify for a green card. So really what the Democrats here, they're pro-immigration. They want more immigrants in the country. They want rules that make it broader rules that make it more conducive for immigrants to qualify for a path to citizenship. And the Republican president, Donald Trump, wanted to make it more difficult for immigrants to qualify. And it hinged on this rule. Now, obviously, the current rule, which is a Biden rule, Homeland Security rule, says immigrants are only deemed public charges and ineligible for immigration if they become primarily dependent on the government for subsistence. So that's a very vague sort of, you're unable to quantify that. So you can see how that the immigrant's never really going to be classified in a quantitative way as a public charge. Under the Trump rule, it was like, oh, hey, if you're taking handouts, then we're not giving you paths to citizenship. So Texas filed a lawsuit.
What's your opinion on that?
My opinion, okay, is that if you come to this country and you want to gain entry to the country, you should be a productive tax-paying person that's on a path to citizenship. So if you're an immigrant and you're automatically getting on food stamps, you're going to be on Medicaid. No, I don't want you in this country taking up our government resources. I'm not sure why immigrants should be given those things.
I agree with you. I agree with you with one caveat. So my caveat would be, I think there should be a carve out for asylum seekers. I think if there's a carve out for asylum seekers, then I entirely agree with the Trump era rule that if you're receiving food stamps or public Medicaid charge, and again, because I know probably a lot of our listeners, a lot of people in the U.S. do not understand like how much more open to immigration the U.S. is than so many other countries. Like we are so open. It is much, much easier to immigrate to the U.S. than a lot of other places are.
Yeah. To me, the Democrats just want the votes, right? The idea you make immigration easier, you give them a path to citizenship. Immigrants are generally pro-Democrat because they got into the country on Democrat laws, and they're typically more likely to take handouts, that's an inflammatory term, but take government assistance like Medicaid and food stamps. So immigrants have that memory of, or maybe they're still on Medicaid and food stamps, and the Democrats are, in my mind, are hoping that they're going to vote for them. But nonetheless, Trump appointee, big surprise, and I don't mean that sarcastically, I am genuinely surprised that a Trump-appointed judge, U.S. District Court in Korea, Texas, dismissed the case. Because the state of Texas, and this was the state's argument, Austin, was that, okay, this rule causes us to have more immigrants. Because it causes us to have more immigrants, we then have to pay for education, we have to pay for healthcare, we have to pay for the immigrants to get their driver's license, and we have to pay to imprison them when they commit crimes. Which, from a cause and effect standpoint, that sounds reasonable to me. You've got a rule making it pro-immigrant, encouraging immigration. And if you encourage immigration, the state of Texas has to foot the bill. Well, the Republican-appointed judge said, no, state of Texas, you have not shown a causal connection. You presented all kinds of evidence saying that a general increase in immigration does increase your burden, your cost, but you haven't shown how this rule specifically does that. Oh, how do you feel about that argument? The judge's logic.
I think the judge's logic is, I'm sure that the opinion was more in depth than this, but if this is the summation of it, then I completely disagree with it. And I also think it'll be overturned. So,
yeah. I think these politicians are just completely out of touch with what the American people really want. And I believe that most Americans are in my camp. They want immigrants to come here, work hard, not take taxpayer dollars away from American citizens. And the politicians are just completely getting this wrong because I think the Democrats want the votes. And the reality is they're completely misreading immigration and the way Americans feel about immigration. And that's why immigration is is always, but it's particularly in this.
And then on the flip side, maybe Republicans should not go around carte blanche saying that Haitian immigrants are all eating dogs and cats. That would be the flip side of things, right? Like maybe we can find a happy medium between, hey, there are no immigrants who are ever on food stamps or ever a burden to our country. And hey, every Haitian immigrant is eating dogs and cats. I think there might be a happy medium between those two.
That has been on every social media. I'm not a big social media guy, but when I do turn it on, the first thing they show me is just a dog being filmed with Trump's voice in the background talking. And the dogs, of course, naturally sounds. So when Trump, being a very bombastic character, when he makes a point, the dog makes a sudden motion. And these dog videos are getting like several hundred views. Meanwhile, often like our video on some obscure log, it's 1,000.
That's why I'm bringing up. They're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats, right?
We've got to get on to our next legal news topic, which is the U.S. Customs Office seizing over 700 pounds of bologna from a woman at the Texas border. Okay. So 43-year-old woman driving across the border from Mexico and crossing at Presidio, Texas. she goes through customs, and when you go through customs, you go across the border, or when you come at your point of entry or your port of entry, you come in, you make a declaration. She said that she had one cooked meal. The border patrol smelled something suspicious, pun very much intended, and he decided to double check it. And it turns out that she had he was carrying the suitcase, and the suitcase felt a little heavy. Turns out she had 748 pounds of bologna, 280 boxes of prescription medications, and $7,600 in cash. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know what the backstory is.
I don't know either, but you know what? I think they were too quick to assume. Yeah. Because you know what? If you want to eat, if 700 pounds of bologna is your definition of one cooked meal, who is the government to say that's not it?
Okay. Yeah. But it turns out that the U.S. Customs Office is very concerned about pork products. And I don't know if it's a rule. It's probably a rule, not an actual statute, but there's a rule. The U.S. Customs the Department of Agriculture has the ability to promulgate and pass rules. And they said, look, generally speaking, pork from anywhere other than the United States is dangerous. And I guess it's not as dangerous as methamphetamine. We're not putting it on that level. It can have far-reaching effects on our agricultural system, which, here's my plug, again, coming from a Jewish background. This is why the Lord made pig flesh unclean biblically by law. Okay. These pigs and eating pig is not a good thing.
Especially back then, right? People didn't know how to prepare it properly to make sure that if it did have anything, it was killed. Yeah.
All kinds of problems in Texas. And don't get me started on those people who decided that they were going to eat a bunch of armadillos and they all got leprosy. Yeah. True story.
You've never seen an armadillo on the side of the road and been like, that looks tasty. Yeah. So the pork wasn't the only thing found though, right? They also found hundreds of boxes of undeclared medication hidden inside like panels of the vehicle.
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah.
And I'll give my wife credit on that. She read her outline and she said the whole title is about bologna. This woman was obviously going to Mexico, buying tons
cheap medication
of prescriptions, which cheap medication, and probably reselling them at 208. Lots of people go over to Mexico. They buy their meds there cheaper. I think the small quantities are overlooked by U.S. Customs. But when you have 280 boxes, we probably don't want to dump a bunch of prescription drugs in the U.S. and that could just be dangerous. The bologna obviously is very dangerous. They destroyed the 40 rolls of bologna, fined her $1,000, and that was their day.
What a travesty! Yeah.
All right, now we've got to move on. Let's answer some legal question. Okay. What's the first?
How do the new Texas business courts work? Would they begin specializing in complex business disputes operations on September 1st of this year?
We first have to explain to our listeners generally a little bit about the courts. Okay. At the trial court level, so when you start off in court, all right, you have justice of the peace court, small claims court. We're not really talking about that. And then you've got most of your courts are in Texas, or you have trials, are county courts or district courts. Right? County courts generally have a smaller jurisdictional limit. You can file some stuff. Is it $200,000, Austin? I can't remember jurisdictional limit. I think it's $200,000. You may have to double check me. Sometimes it goes up a little bit. But generally smaller dollar stuff is filed in county court. You can get a little bit quicker of a trial there. District court is where everything else is. Now, here's the problem that we have in district, and we're real estate attorneys and business lawyers and probate lawyers. But in our district courts, you and I, Austin, we're primarily doing business and real estate. But do you know the percentage of car accident cases that are in the district courts? It's, if you were to take a wild guess, if everything on their docket, what percentage of
90
car accidents? Yes, I think that's the right on. I think that's the right And listeners, I'm going to tell you that was not in our show outline. Austin just guessed that. And I believe the last time I checked, like 90% of the cases filed in our district courts are car accident cases. So what that means is when Austin and other lawyers from our firm, and Austin has say he has a complex real estate matter, when he's going in front of a district court judge or a complex business matter, that judge is not used to seeing the type of case. So there's a lot of education that Austin and the opposing counsel are doing to try to bring that judge up to speed. And another little interesting thing that you may or may not know, Austin, because trials are rare nowadays. Our cases for trial get called a lot quicker than all the other car accident cases. I believe because the judge is so bored and tired of hearing car accident cases, the judge just wants to hear something.
Yeah.
Okay. So now other states across the country, they've had these specialized business courts. Over 50% of the other states have had specialized business courts. The state of Delaware, which has been famously the predominant place for corporations being formed in the Delaware, has long had their business courts. So Texas has now finally created courts. And what we're gonna have is we're gonna have about 11 divisions in Texas. Mostly business cases over $5 million can be filed in business courts. All right. And those cases are going to see that. We've got some quotes here. Greg Abbott has a quote here. So do you have that quote from Greg Abbott?
Yeah. He said, there are some people who up until now are judging business cases and have no idea what goes on in the business world. Texas businesses deserve to have well-qualified judges with a wealth of experience, either as a former judge themselves or as litigants who have been heavily involved in litigating business cases.
These guys are appointed. Greg Abbott just swore me. The 5 divisions, the major metro areas, probably Houston, DFW, San Antonio, Austin, those courts are already up and running, I think they're ready to take business cases. There's another big problem with district courts, the clearance rate. All right. District courts have a clearance rate of 87%. That means that there are more cases being filed in our district courts than the courts are actually getting rid of. So then the courts are actually resolving. So we constantly are having this case bloat in Texas. So hopefully this resolves up. Now, what's the criticism here, Brian? What are the critics?
The critics say that first, the transition from certain cases being heard by courts with elected judges to courts with judges that are appointed by the governor, they think that problem. Appointed judges also may not reflect the ideology of the local communities.
The listeners need to know that this bill and the idea of having a specialized business court in Texas received a huge amount. And this is a very hotly debated kind of issue. We've mentioned as attorneys that practice business law, we mentioned all about these courts. But there are a lot of lay people out there, and there's a lot of attorneys as well. So this was pure cronyism, right? Because yes, our elected officials passed this bill to create these business courts, but now you've got the governor appointing these judges, and that's where the cronyism comes in. But hotly contested issue. Nonetheless, we are plowing ahead. The courts are there. Big dollar business cases are going to be in these specialized business courts. $5 billion is really a lot in country.
Quite a bit.
So big numbers, publicly traded companies, those are going to be those courts. So, you're still going to have a lot of cases that can be in our regular district court if that's what you like. But all right, that's it on that one. Next question, our next legal question we have, and our final legal question for the day, is who does not have to complete a seller's disclosure in Texas? That's not complete, right? Seller's disclosures, for those that don't know, when you sell a residential home, that's just one dwelling unit, single family residential home, you have to complete a seller's disclosure with some very limited exceptions. And the seller's disclosure is a document the seller completes, and it has things like, do you know anything about the property? Has the property ever flooded? Does anything need to be? And this is supposed to give the buyer kind of honest information about the property. And if the buyer later finds out that something was untrue, then that seller's disclosure is going to serve as very strong evidence. The seller may have misrepresented something. So the seller's disclosure is a powerful tool in really trying to pin sellers on what's going on, what's wrong with the property. That's what a seller's disclosure is. Now, it doesn't need to complete them, right? First of all, if it's a commercial property, you don't need to complete a seller's disclosure. If it's a residential property over one unit, you don't need to complete a seller's disclosure. And there's other exemptions. Section 5.008 E like Echo. Can you read those exemptions
Yeah,
for us?
absolutely. So the other exemptions here are a court-ordered sale or foreclosure, like a trustee or receiver selling the property, a trustee in the bankruptcy, a bank who bought property back with a credit bid in a foreclosure, an administrator of an estate, so like selling an estate after someone has passed, versus selling a property after someone has passed, sales between co-owners of a property, if you sell to a spouse, or if there's lineal kinship, so like kids, parents, grandchildren, spouses as a part of a divorce, to or from the government, if there's new construction that has never been occupied. And then finally, sales where the dwelling does not exceed 5%, like lots and lot, 5% of the land itself, like lots and lot value.
Yeah. So if you were to listen to that list, and it's quite a list for people, sellers who don't need to fill out a seller's disclosure, you can really summarize all of what Austin just read by people that don't really have any knowledge of the property, like trustees or administrators of estates, and then people that you've got a special relationship with, like family or spouses or ex-spouses, and the government and new home builders, right? Or if you're selling a property for lot value. That's your major categories of people or entities that don't need to fill out. So we had this come up. One of my real estate agents, one of my realtors at my real estate company, had this question. So I thought I'd throw it in here to go ahead and cover that. So we knocked that one out thoroughly, Austin. I love it when we get an easy legal question that you can just go right to the code.
It's
and answer.
very simple.
Right?
Yeah, it's just black letter law.
Yeah.
So,
as Austin said, now this brings us to my favorite part of the show. It's our rave section. Right. Look, it's homecoming season, people, and apparently what's happening in these very wealthy areas is there's a lot of parents out there that are having after parties. So your kid, should you choose to have children, if you ever have a teenager, Austin, and if you end up living in a very affluent area, the thing that they do is they go to the game. It's all weekend event in Texas. It's a really big deal. And then they go to the school dance, but nobody really goes to the school dance. They don't go very long. And then they immediately go to these after parties that are usually held at parents' homes. And what's going on at these homes is just a huge amount of underage drinking. And I found out that this is very pervasive and the parents are enabling this. And I'm absolutely shocked. And I'm curious on your take, Austin. I've got a freshman in high school. He calls me up. He said, Dad, I want to leave the dance. We're going to head over to so-and-so's house. So I know what's going on. I'm not naive. I said, son, first of all, I don't want you doing any underage drinking or substances. I test for that in my house. I test for it, Austin. And I said,
do you have a breathalyzer? How do you test?
We have we do random urine tests. It's not, Austin's laughing. Austin, this is what it's like being a parent.
I believe you. I'm not laughing at the fact that you, like that you're telling me you do. It's just, I wouldn't have. It's just very interesting. So
I told him, I said, look, I said, son, you go over there, and I know who it is out of mine. And I said, if I go over to Mr. So-and-so's house, and if I find that there's underage drinking over there, you need to know that I may come up there. One, you may go home, and two, I may call the district hall and see if we can make this thing up. And I said, okay. So sure enough, I gotta go over there about 11:30 just to check it out. And this is like, I don't know, a $3 to $5 million home. My friend has rented peace officers, licensed officers to stand outside on the driveway. There are limo buses parked in front of the house. This is a very common thing, Austin. Very common thing.
This is very different than homeschool prom, but go on.
Yes. Now, if you live in Memorial or Highland Park cities up in Dallas or Alamo Heights in San Antonio, or, fill in the blank, whatever wealthy neighborhood in our big metro areas in Texas, this is very prevalent. So sure enough, I go into the party and I walk in, to the backyard, and there's these little vodka bottles all on the littered throughout the yard, like whiskey bottles and beer bottles, something called White Claw.
Yeah, it's a hard seltzer. Yeah.
Okay. So that one,
the least offensive of those things you mentioned, to be fair. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Just all
Yeah.
over the yard and vomit. It looks like these are freshmen. They're 15 years old. Most of these guys, they can't grow a full
Sure.
beard, Austin. They look close. I'm not even sure many of them went through puberty.
Why
Okay?
you don't have to do it
So-
to them like that.
So they're having like a 15-year-old frat
Yeah.
rager, okay, in the back of this house. So, look, you'll be glad to know I did not call the district attorney. I did tell my son, come on, we're very discreet, really, we're leaving. And that's it. We left.
Did he pass his test?
I haven't tested him yet. It's a random test. I believe he will because he struck me as very sober at that very moment. I'm shocked by this. Okay, when I was a kid, like we had to work for it. I'm not going to say that I'm like holier than thou. I know, Austin, you were perfect and homeschooled, but like when I was a kid, you would have to go to a field party, right? You'd have to find a parent who wasn't going to be home. It was hard work doing this. What do you think about this? What I've just described, Austin? You think this is just...
So I'm going to take this opportunity to give my opinion on just drinking in America in general, right? I think it is unfortunate that our legal age to drink alcohol is so high compared to a lot of other like European countries, et cetera, because I think that's created, and like we have a social stigma around like it as well. And I think that's created this idea in young people's heads that like drinking is like this cool, like edgy thing, right? And here in the US, even if you're of legal drinking age, being wasted, people accept that as something that people do. And there's really not a huge social stigma with it here. And I think that's a problem. And I just think that if we could lower the drinking age to 18 and not have people go insane with it, I think it'd be good. But because of just the social approach towards alcohol in the US, I don't think we can. So, yeah.
That's interesting. Here's the counter argument. Here's the parents that are enabling this. This is what they say. They say they're good. They're all the kids are going to go out there and do it. So I want them doing it here in a safe environment where they're not going to drink and drive. That's what the parents say. And I also think the parents are doing this because some of these parents, they want to be the cool, they want to be the popular parent. And I think that's very sad as well. Here are my biggest issues with it. All right. How many kids at these parties are being raped or molested, right? Because of the alcohol. And if they had better judgment, they wouldn't be having that happen to them. The other thing I need to say is there are a lot of studies out there now that drinking is not good for you. And I pulled this one study from the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse, or it's citing some things. And this is what National Institute of Alcohol Abuse says. You start using drugs or alcohol at around the age of 15, your odds of having a substance abuse problem or becoming an alcoholic later is 3.5 times likely. You're 3.5, you're not like 20%, it's like you're 350% more likely to have a substance abuse problem if you start drinking at 15. Okay. National Institute of Alcohol also cites 2 psychological studies to support people's development. People's brains are developing well into their 20s, and alcohol alters brain function and brain development, which basically can affect their cognitive ability later in life. So they're going to have potentially learning problems. And it's also, again, going to increase the rate of alcohol. And why isn't the district attorney doing anything about this, Austin?
I would hope it's because they think they have better things to do and are actually doing better things. But I don't know.
Yeah. Kim Ogg is the Harris County DA. All right, Kim, if you're listening to this, all right, we want you to look into it. And I'm going to do the heavy lifting for you, Kim. Because we got a legal question. We got a little bonus legal question in here as our kind of part of our rant and rave section, right? And I want to be clear about this, Austin. I want to ask you, the parents are not supplying the alcohol. These are not stupid parents. They're operating under the belief that if the kid comes to the party, all these kids come to the party, all the kids bring their own alcohol into the backyard, and the parents are just sitting inside the living room. By the way, they've got these big glass windows that look out over to the pool. That's how all these houses are designed, so that you're seeing all this stuff going on. But the parents believe that as long as they're not furnishing it or buying it, then they're not.
And they don't have social host liability either, right? If they go out and drink and drive, yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole. I think that's the easy one. We'll get the civil liability is the easy one. But okay, so I've come up with two crimes that I want. District Attorney, Harris County DA, Kim Arm. This is what I think you should prosecute on. Okay. The first one is purchase of alcohol for a minor or furnished to a minor, right? Here's what it says. Except this is, I think it's Texas Alcohol Beverage Code, section 106.06a. Except is provided in subsection B. Don't worry about that. That's all the exceptions for when you deal with your parents, right? A person commits an offense if the person purchases an alcoholic beverage for or gives an alcoholic beverage to a minor, all right? So purchase for or gives. Now, an offense under that section is a class A misdemeanor unless someone gets seriously injured, in which case it's a state jail felony, right? All right. So, Austin, is the parent who, like, sitting in his living room, knows all these kids are like the cops out there too, the peace officers out there, the kids they all know what's going on back there, throw up alcohol all on the floor and all that stuff. Do you think the parent can be prosecuted under furnishing alcohol to a minor because the parent says, I didn't buy it, I didn't give it to him? What do you?
I do not think under the black letter of the law they could be prosecuted under this because I don't think they gave it to them. Now, if I do think that it should be amended to say something about providing a space for them to consume it, I think that should be added in. But as it is written, I don't think so.
That's a fair opinion. I think that's what the parents are believing when they're having these 15-year-old frat ragers. I think that argument is dangerous. I think it's a dangerous, stupid argument. I don't think you have to physically give something to somebody to actually give it, right? For example, if I'm a drug dealer and I'm not expressly ordering that some guy, that Joe, take the drugs to the person every time. But certainly, if I'm sitting in my house and enabling it, basically, am I not doing this thing? This idea of physically giving being the ultimate effect seems absurd under this statute. But Austin raises a very valid point. I looked up some of the cases. I didn't spend a lot of time on it. I could not find one case that really interpreted the word give and whether that can be extended to this situation. Most of the cases were with some really blatant kind of stuff. So,
I handed Everclear to this 5-year-old and they drank it. That's not giving. Yeah.
Most of them were just blatant. All right. How about this one? Here's my other idea. Endangering a child in Texas. Yeah. All right. Texas Penal Code section 22.041. A person commits an offense if he intentionally, knowingly, recklessly, or with criminal negligence by an act or omission engages in contact that places a child younger than 15 years in imminent danger of death, bodily injury, or physical or mental impairment.
Yeah. I absolutely think that one could work, right? Especially because of the omission part, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So now the key is 15. So if you're a parent out there doing this, you better hope no 8th graders stuck in your party.
Yeah.
And you better hope that everyone who turned 15.
When
you're doing it. I saw that those prepubescent 15-year-olds at Memorial High School and I'm not so sure that all of them were 15. So you need to be careful. And that endangering a child is a state jail felony.
Don't do that.
So
it's bad.
Don't do it. Also, when I was reading this code, I came across something interesting that I just want to tie in here. There's an exception for endangering a child if you're for organized sports where you've given them all the proper equipment.
I guess that makes sense.
I just thought it was just a random, bizarre exception. We have all this peewee football in Texas. So are you endangering these children when the 8-year-old has his arm broken?
Probably, but there's an exception.
There's an exception. Everybody can sleep easier knowing that this Saturday when all the kids are at peewee football, there's an exception for everybody for endangering these children. Okay.
Oh man,
just bizarre. What a crazy we live in.
Yeah, and for our
Austin,
listeners, this was funny. So when Phil messaged me when we were about to start, I think he was writing down our show notes, right? And he just messaged me this line. He said, "How about endangering a child in Texas?" And I was like, I don't want to endanger a child in Texas.
Right. Austin's not touching that. All right. And our final point on this rant to rave section is Austin already mentioned. Look, even if you avoid the criminal prosecution, even if you beat the criminal a rap, I think the civil law on this is really easy. So if one of these kids goes out there and hurts somebody or drinks and drives or injures somebody else, I think you've got a great negligence case. Or let's say that one of those kids slips and falls or drowns in a pool, God forbid. I mean, I think parents have a negligence case. Not just wonderful.
It's on the theory of what I said earlier, social host negligence. So yeah, social host liability.
I mean, this is crazy stuff. I'm just telling you, this is, and that's my rant on this. This is just absolutely crazy stuff. And I can't believe that this is going on. And I guess because of this podcast, my children will now be social pariahs. Maybe I will too, because maybe all my buddies are hosting the parties. Okay. That brings our show to a close. I've been your host, Phil Silberman. Austin Black has been my co-host. Like us, follow us, review us wherever you get your podcasts. Nothing in this show is to be considered legal advice. And this has all been for entertainment purposes only. If you have a legal question, feel free to email us at info@silblawfirm.com. That's info at silb, S-I-L-B, like boy, lawfirm.com, and say you want it publicly answered in the podcast. We will do our best. Everybody have a great rest of your week and weekend. Bye.